Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into a landmark confrontation, a real showdown between international law and raw global politics. And it was all sparked by one of the deadliest terror attacks in history, the Lockerbie bombing. This is the story of how that single event forced the world's highest court to go head-to-head with its most powerful political body. Okay, so it all begins with this, a truly horrific moment in history. December 21st, 1988. Pan Am Flight 103 is flying over Lockerbie, Scotland, when a bomb just tears it out of the sky. In an instant, 270 people are gone, 259 on the plane, and 11 more on the ground. You have to understand, this wasn't just some terrible accident. It was a calculated act of terror, and the world was demanding answers. After a massive, painstaking investigation, the trail led to 2 Libyan intelligence officers. And the response from the UK and the US? Well, it was blunt, and it was non-negotiable. Their demand was simple: hand over the suspects for trial. Period. And this is where things get really interesting. See, Libya refused to hand them over. And that refusal didn't just kick off a diplomatic firestorm. No, it ignited this absolutely unprecedented legal battle. A fight that would pit the world's highest court against its most powerful political body. So instead of just surrendering its citizens, Libya decided to play a legal card of its own. They pointed to a really important international treaty, one specifically designed to handle crimes against aviation. It's called the 1971 Montreal Convention. And here's the key part. Libya, the UK, and the US had all signed it. Libya's whole case was built around this core legal principle, and it has a fancy Latin name, aut dedere aut judicare. But don't worry about the Latin. What it means is actually pretty simple. Either extradite or prosecute. So, what Libya was arguing was, hey, under this treaty we all signed, we have a choice. We can either hand the suspects over to you, or we can prosecute them ourselves, right here in our own courts. And look, this wasn't just some clever interpretation they came up with. It's written right there, black and white, in Article 7 of the Convention. It says that if a country chooses not to extradite a suspect, it is, and this is a quote, obliged to submit the case for the purpose of prosecution. So for Libya, this was their smoking gun. They believed this text gave them a clear, legally protected choice. So, feeling like its rights under this treaty were being totally ignored by the UK's demand, Libya did something really bold. On March 3rd, 1992, they actually sued the United Kingdom. And they didn't just go to any court. They went to the world's highest court, the International Court of Justice. The stage was now set for a legal showdown of epic proportions. But here's the twist. While all the lawyers were busy preparing their legal arguments, the politicians were making a completely different and frankly game-changing move. The action was about to shift from the courtroom to a very different arena, the chamber of the UN Security Council, which is basically the epicenter of global power politics. And you can really see the power escalating here. First, the Security Council passed a resolution that just kind of urged Libya to cooperate. It was more of a strong suggestion. But then they brought out the big guns. They invoked their ultimate power under something called Chapter 7 of the UN Charter. This is reserved for major threats to international peace. And let me be clear, a Chapter 7 resolution is not a suggestion. It's a legally binding order that every single UN member must obey. And get this. Look at how incredibly fast this all went down. March 3rd, Libya files its case at the court. The court starts its hearings, and then bam, on March 31st, just a few days after those hearings wrapped up, the Security Council drops its bombshell, that binding resolution demanding Libya comply immediately. Suddenly, the court, the ICJ, was in a really, really tough spot. So now we have our first direct confrontation. The big question for the International Court of Justice was this. Do we protect Libya's legal rights, the ones written in the treaty, or do we bow to the Security Council, which is now ordering Libya to do the exact opposite? What do you do? Well, the court's decision came down, and it was pretty decisive. By a vote of 11-5, the judges rejected Libya's request for help. They decided not to step in and protect Libya's claimed rights under the treaty. In this first round, it looked like politics had landed a knockout blow. So how did the court justify this? Well, their reasoning came down to 2 absolute powerhouse articles in the UN Charter itself. Article 25 says all UN members have to obey the Security Council. But Article 103, that's the real trump card. It says that when there's a conflict, obligations to the UN Charter always win out over any other international agreement. So just like that, the Montreal Convention and Libya's rights under it were basically pushed to the side.
So for the next 6 years, that's how things stood. Sanctions stayed on Libya, and the legal case looked pretty much dead in the water. But the UK wasn't satisfied. They wanted to kill the case for good. So they went back to the court, arguing that the court shouldn't even be allowed to hear the case anymore. And this move, well, it kicked off a second and very surprising round.
Okay, so fast forward to 1998. The UK comes back and files what's called a preliminary objection. Now, that's just legal speak for a motion to dismiss. Their goal was simple: use the Security Council's powerful resolutions as a hammer to get this entire case thrown out of court once and for all. And the UK's argument was pretty straightforward. They basically said, look, the Security Council has spoken, their decisions are binding, they override the Montreal Convention, so what's left to argue about? There's no legal dispute here anymore. In their view, the case was totally moot. But then came the surprise. In a pretty stunning reversal that I think shocked a lot of people, the court completely disagreed. By a landslide vote, 13-3, the ICJ declared that, yes, it did have the right to hear the case. The case was admissible. The court was basically pushing back hard. The court's logic for this was honestly pretty brilliant. It all came down to timing. They said, think about the date the application was filed. That was March 3rd, 1992. On that day, a real valid legal dispute existed between Libya and the UK. The Security Council's binding resolution, that didn't happen until weeks later, on March 31st. So the court argued that this later political event couldn't just reach back in time and erase a jurisdiction that was already established. It was locked in. Now, to be clear, this 1998 decision didn't end the whole thing. It didn't make the sanctions disappear or force the UK to change its mind. What it did do was create this incredible historic standoff right at the very heart of the United Nations. So you ended up with two of the UN's most powerful bodies on a total collision course. On one side, you have the ICJ, the court, firmly planting its flag and saying, we have the judicial authority to hear this case based on the law. And on the other side, you still had the Security Council's binding political demands, backed by all the power of the UN Charter, still in full force. And this whole episode just perfectly illustrates this fundamental tension that's baked right into the UN system. You've got the world of law, represented by the ICJ, which acts as the guardian of treaties and legal rights. And then you've got the world of politics, represented by the Security Council, which has this incredible power to maintain peace, even if it means steamrolling specific treaty obligations to do it. In the end, the Lockerbie case itself was settled through backroom diplomacy, not a final verdict from the judges. But it left behind this huge unanswered question, a question that's still one of the biggest challenges in international relations. When law and politics collide on the world stage, who gets the final say?